Chapter 1, Verse 1. Through the grace of God alone, the desire for non-duality arises in wise men to save them from great fear. Non-duality, monistic consciousness, in which the knower, knowledge, and knowable soul and God become one, the highest realization of divinity. Fear. The word fear includes also such states of mind as insecurity, despair, and grief, all of which arise from a consciousness of oneself as limited and separate from others, and which therefore can be dispelled only by realizing oneself as the All. Verse 2. How shall I salute the formless being, indivisible, auspicious, and immutable, who fills all this with his self, and also fills the self with his self? Salute. No form of greeting or worship is possible where there is no consciousness of distinction. Fills. The reality and substance of the so-called individual self is the divine self. Verse 3. The universe composed of the five elements is like water in a mirage. Of whom to shall I make obeisance? I who am one and taintless. Five elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. According to most philosophical systems of India, these combine to constitute the phenomenal universe and are derived from God associated with Maya or ignorance, taintless, untouched by the slightest ignorance and hence absolutely pure. The word is often applied to the self and God. Verse 4. All is verily the absolute self. Distinction and non-distinction do not exist. How can I say it exists? It does not exist. I am filled with wonder. Verse 5. The essence and the whole of Vedanta is the knowledge, this supreme knowledge, that I by nature the formless, all-pervasive self. Verse 6. There is no doubt that that God who is the self of all, pure, indivisible like the sky, naturally stainless. Verse 7. I indeed, immutable and infinite, of the form of pure intelligence, I do not know how or in relation to whom joy and sorrow exist. Verse 8. I have no mental activity, good or bad. I have no bodily function, good or bad. I have no verbal action, good or bad. I am the nectar of knowledge, beyond the senses, pure. Verse 9. The mind, indeed, is of the form of space. The mind, indeed, is omnifaced. The mind is the past. The mind is all. But in reality, there is no mind. All, the phenomenal universe, including all time and space, cosmos. In reality, in the highest realization of the spirit, there is no mind. Verse 10. I, the one only, am all this, beyond space and continuous. How can I see the self as visible or hidden? Continuous, without the interventions of another substance, therefore homogeneous and undifferentiated. Hidden. The question of the self as being hidden or visible does not arise when oneself is that self. Verse 11. Thus you are one, when you do not understand that you are unchangeable, one, equally preserved in all. O Mighty One, how can you, who are ever shining, unrestricted, think of day and night? You. Dattatreya now addresses the disciple to whom he is imparting the highest truth. Night. There is no perception of any time or condition in perfect self-realization. Verse 12. Know the self always to be everywhere, one and unintercepted. I am the meditator and the highest object of meditation. Why do you divide the indivisible? Unintercepted. See notes on continuous, verse 10. Divide. Even when the act of meditation is an expression of ignorance, because it implies duality. Verse 13. You are not born, nor you die. At no time do you have a body. The scripture declares in many different ways the well-known dictum, all is Brahman. Verse 14. You are he who is exterior and interior. You are the auspicious one, existing everywhere at all times. Why are you running hither and thither, delude like an unclean spirit? Verse 15. Union and separation exist in regard neither to you nor to me. There is no you, no me, nor is there this universe. All is verily the self alone. Verse 16. You do not belong to that which is composed of the 5 objects of sense, such as sound, nor does that belong to you. You indeed are the supreme reality. Why then do you suffer? 5. The world appearance is composed of the 5 objects of sense, sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell, and is not, in reality, connected with the self. Verse 17. For you there is no birth or death. For you there is no mind. For you there is no bondage or liberation, no good or evil. Why do you shed tears, my child? Neither you nor I have name and form. Verse 18. O mind, why do you wander about deluded like an unclean spirit? Behold the self indivisible. Be happy through renunciation of attachment. Verse 19. You are verily are truth, devoid of change, motionless, one of the nature of freedom. You have neither attachment nor aversion. Why do you suffer seeking the objects of desires? Verse 20. All the scriptures say that the truth is without attributes, pure, immutable, bodiless, and existing equally everywhere. No need to be that. Verse 21. Know that which has form to be false, that which is formless to be eternal. Through the instruction of this truth, there is no longer rebirth into this world. No longer. Knowing oneself as eternal, one is not born into this world anymore, since incarnation is caused only by soul's ignorance of its true nature. Yet let it be known that some return for the compassion's sake while yet knowing the absolute. Verse 22. Sages say that reality is one and only the same, and through renunciation of attachment, the mind, which is one in many, ceases to exist. One in many. One in a high, but not in the highest state of illumination. Many in the states of ignorance. Verse 23. If it is of the nature of the not-self, how can there be samadhi? If it is of the nature of the self, how can there be samadhi? If it is both is and is not, how can there be samadhi? If all is one and of the nature of freedom, how can there be samadhi? It. Inconscientious or true realization. Samadhi, the absorption of the mind in the absolute Brahman, as a result of which the eternal truth is realized. Dattatreya maintains that the practice of samadhi has no justification. If the universe of our experiences is not the self, then the true I is not in the state of samadhi, for truth is not there. If our experience is of the self, then samadhi is superfluous. How can the self then be in samadhi? Verse 24. You are pure homogeneous reality, disembodied, unborn, and immutable. Why do you think of yourself as I know it here, or as I do not know? I know it here. Our knowledge of self in this earthly state is incorrect. To maintain that we do not have any true knowledge of the self here is also incorrect. Verse 25. By such sentences, thou art, our own self is affirmed. of that which is untrue and composed of the five elements. The Shruti scripture says, not this, that. The phenomenal existence as well as the unknowable. Verse 26. As the self is filled by the self, so is all filled continuously by you. There is no meditator or meditation. Why do your mind meditate shamelessly? One should be ashamed to meditate, because meditation presupposes a shameful forgetfulness of one's true nature. If one does not know the self, meditation is the way to realization. After realization, one will cease to meditate. Verse 27. I do not know the Supreme. How shall I speak of him? I do not know the Supreme. How shall I worship him? If I am the Supreme One, who is the highest truth, who is homogeneous being, and like unto space, how then shall I speak of him and worship him? No. Empirical knowledge belongs to a lower state in which the Supreme cannot be perceived. Therefore, one cannot speak of knowing the Supreme. If I am the Supreme, how can I see myself? Can the eye see the eye? Verse 28. The principle of ego is not the truth, which is homogeneous, which is free from the cause of superimposition or distinctions of perceived and perceiver. How can the ego be that which is aware of itself? Verse 29. There is no substance whatever which is by nature unlimited. There is no substance whatever which is of the nature of reality. The very self is the supreme truth. There is neither injury nor non-injury in it. Substance. Relative reality. Verse 30. You are the homogeneous reality. You are pure, bodiless, birthless, and imperishable. Why then do you have any delusion about the self? Again, why am I myself deluded? Verse 31. When the pot is broken, the space within it is absorbed in the infinite space and becomes undifferentiated. When the mind becomes pure, I do not perceive any difference between the mind